Hello and welcome to the Top Hearthstone Cards of the Week, where we look at the r/custom Hearthstone's top cards of the week. I am your host, the Lamb Sauce. And this week we're going tropical because I'm on vacation and I'm in a hotel, so the audio quality may not be the best. First up we have Plague Rat, 2 mana, 1/4 beast, and the card text reads, whenever this minion takes damage, replace their card text with the text of this one. I wish I had thought of this game mechanic myself. So to explain, you can think of this as kind of infecting another card. So if this card gets attacked or gets hit, it will change the text of the card that the rat hit. This means that any of the card's previous texts will be silenced, so if the card started out with taunt, it would lose it like it was silenced. But if a minion were to be buffed by a spell or another minion, it wouldn't lose the buff. It silences whatever is on the card text. Of course, Battlecry doesn't really matter because the Battlecry already happened. The second part is that it copies the text to whatever card it damages. This means that this effect will continue to spread, and pretty much all the minions on the board will soon have this effect. And this means that the card text for all the minions on the board won't have any effect. I think just calling this type of mechanic infect would really make the card a lot clearer, but I'm glad the creator specified what exactly the effect does on this card. I don't even think this card would necessarily be super powerful. It's almost like a tech card, so like the crabs that deal with pirates and murlocs. This card could be used to counter strong cards with powerful card text like Ragnaros in Wild or Tyrion in Standard. A way this card could be used is that if you play it before your opponent curves into one of their stronger cards, you'd actually force them to use removal and postpone their play of that card. I also like how it creates kind of a disadvantage for the person that played the card originally, because the board is now full of infected cards on both sides, and they won't be able to play any strong texted card either. There's still going to be some games where the whole board is infected until someone has a big board clear. I really like the design. If it was like a new mechanic, I don't know how many cards should be printed with this mechanic, but I think it's neither overpowered nor undervalued, and I think it would definitely be a cool card to have. Up next we have the 2 mana Mage spell Frozen to the Bone. Give an enemy minion Enrage Frozen. So in this case, when a minion is damaged, it is frozen. Freeze overall is a super powerful ability. The archetype Freeze Mage is all about drawing cards and prolonging the game. But even with this, Blizzard not too long ago released Freezing Potion, and that sees absolutely no play, because freezing a single target minion is only going to buy you a turn. But with this card, even if it costs 2 mana, you can invest more resources into it in order for it to be more powerful. So of course this card works really well with the Mage hero power, so you can play the spell on an enemy minion and then ping it, and you can keep on pinging it in order to get that value. Now this isn't very useful in aggro or games where you need to use all your mana, but let's say you're playing a more control deck and you're just trying to buy time. If you're going to ping anyways, might as well ping an enemy minion. Because you can keep on adding value and investing if you want to keep a minion frozen, I think this could see some play. Now counters to this, if you silence this minion, of course it will be able to attack normally. No longer does it have the enrage effect. But also, if your opponent were to heal their minion, it should get rid of the freeze right away. This means that this card would be really bad against Priest. It does a good job at buying Freeze Mage some time for single target minions, but it doesn't do anything too overpowered or crazy. And next up we have Banana Bunch, the 3 mana 2/2 Paladin card. Death Rattle, add a number of bananas to your hands equal to this minion's attack. So to start, a banana is a +1/+1 1 mana spell that you can get from some monkeys in the game right now, and there's like a tavern brawl that gives you different bananas. But basically it's a cheap way to buff. If you want to get real trippy with it, if you ran 2 of these in your deck, you could have some sort of bananaception. But why I think this card would be so good in the game, and a really well designed card, is that I think it would actually create a new deck that combined Buffing Paladin with Quest Paladin. So right now both of these decks are pretty laughable, but the banana could be the answer. Right now Paladin Quest, there aren't real legit decks, but some of them do include the monkeys that will give you the bananas, and those are just cheap ways that can give you buffs. But the problem is with the Quest Paladin is that all these buff spells, they're pretty low value, they don't cost that much. So if you have to fill your deck and you have to run these pretty bad cards, at least 6 of them to get the buffs, there are higher buffs that are a little bit better. Basically, you're going to make a bad deck. You're going to make a bad deck. Bad deck. But if you run these bananas in there, you can fill your deck with actual good cards and then have these bananas to fulfill your quest. And of course, the buffing element is that, while buffing isn't great right now, if you had some sort of endgame, maybe completing the Paladin quest, you could buff your cards, you could have mostly minions with a couple of buffs, and then eventually, with these bananas, you'll be able to complete the Paladin quest, you'll get your Megadon, and it will all be good. I think combining these 2 decks could possibly make a strong enough deck, maybe not tier 1, but could probably be tier 2. Of course, there are counters to the banana. You can silence the Death Rattle. You can return the minion to your hand, but I think this card could be amazing to combine these two decks, and I've never seen just one single card, a custom card, that could create a new meta, a bananaception meta, from two previous decks. And next up we have Terrify, 2-mana warrior spell, return all minions with 2 or less attack to its owner's hand. So this card is a little rogue-esque if you consider it like a mini Vanish, or maybe it's kind of priest-esque if you look at Shadow Word of Horror. It will destroy living mana for a druid, but most importantly it's a cheap anti-aggro. Against aggro, in the early turns, yes, this will definitely help you with your life total, but later on in the game your opponent will have the mana to play these minions, so you might buy yourself another turn, but the next turn your opponent's going to be able to play them again. So I thought, how to kind of change this card up, maybe make it a little bit more warrior, make it return all minions with 2 or less health. I don't want this card to be not powerful enough. I want it to be able to work against aggro. So I think changing it into health instead of attack might be good, but maybe that would be too powerful. I also don't mind maybe making this card into like a mini brawl. So maybe it's 2 mana, return all minions with 2 or less health except 1. So there's the sort of random element, there's the mini brawl element, and it's just something to make the card more warrior-esque. But I really like the idea of warrior having a consistent early board removal, but not necessarily something that could be overpowered late game. It's a good card, and I hope it would work well against aggro, well enough to put it in a control deck. And last up we have the 3-mana 2/2 legendary shaman card Farseer Nobundo, I think I'm saying that right, with the battle cry, discover a card with overload and swap its cost and overload. So let's say as an example you play this card turn 3 and you get 3 options. One of them is Flame Wreathed Faceless, which is the infamous 4-mana 7/7. So instead of the card costing 4 and 2 overload, it would actually just cost 2 but 4 overload. Now, looking at that, it does sound bad. You don't want the 2-mana 7/7. But looking over at all the overload cards, the cheaper ones actually tend to overload more than they cost. The later overloads cost more and have less overload. And overall, looking at all these, I don't think there's much of a problem. 2-mana Doomhammer is a little bit scary. 3-mana Earth Elemental and 2-mana Volcano. These are things you could be worried about, maybe. But you have to remember that the card you have to play in order to discover these is 3 mana. So if you, coin it out turn 2 or play it on turn 3, you'll be able to discover something, and maybe, a turn 4 2-mana Doomhammer is going to be a little bit scary, but the turn after that, they're not going to be able to do anything. It is a discover mechanic. So right now, there are only 15 overload cards, so if you add 1/15 plus 1/14 plus 1/13, you get 0.215 or 21.5% to get a specific card that you want. Balancing this card in the future might be tough. I think Blizzard's done an alright job of releasing, okay overload cards as of recently. Eternal Sentinel could be a problem, I think, but then again, that's against other control decks in which overload cards are actually not very good against. I think there'll be those rare occasions where it's kind of overly powerful, but I think it's actually weak enough that it probably wouldn't see play. It's a really creative idea. This is definitely a tough one, so you'll have to let me know what you think. Would you want a 2-mana 7/7? And now it is time for the bonus viewer submission of the week. If you want, my Twitter's down below. You can tweet me any of your custom Hearthstone ideas, and I will look through them and showcase one in the next week. And feel free to submit every week if you so desire. And this week's submission is by Ghost Blob. And this is a 3-mana spell, Metamorphosis. Transform a minion into a 0/3 cocoon, and Death Rattle, resummon the transformed minion and adapt it. So first of all, you can play this card defensively or aggressively. So there's already a Shaman card that turns your opponent's card into a frog, and that's a very powerful card. But this could kind of do that same effect, but less powerful, and really just buy yourself some more time. Your opponent's most likely not going to be teched in order to actually get the value out of that. So they aren't going to be able to kill their minion, they aren't going to be able to buff it and then attack you. Most decks aren't going to be able to deal with this, but some will. But then this actually causes a problem for the user. If you do use it defensively, that does make your board clears harder to do because, it is just 3 health. And if you use a board clear, that 0/3 is going to come back and the minion is going to come back even stronger. So Metamorphosis defensively can buy yourself some time. You can wait until you have a certain board. You're able to kill it and then use some sort of board clear to actually clear the minion that you needed to clear earlier. Now, this does cause a certain problem for your opponent. Let's say you're able to kill the minion eventually because you have a board clear lined up. How would your opponent be able to adapt? I would imagine it would just adapt randomly, which I don't really like as a mechanic for adapt. I think you should be able to choose your adapt. So I think that could be a problem that maybe Ghost Blob, if you'd like to comment down below, maybe you could change the card text to say that it could only target friendly minions. And this kind of leads me into my other point, which would be that offensively, you could build a deck around this. I think if the card were to change to only friendly minions, it would have to be some better reward. maybe adapt twice. But there could be decks that could use this in order to buff their minions in a certain way. But there are cards designed to give you value for killing your own cards as well. And not only that, but when you resummon a minion, you actually bring it back to its original stat. So if a minion's about to die, you can use this card and then it will come back with its original health. So in some way, you're able to also heal cards and make them more valuable. It's like the power of Moat Lurker when a card comes back. Or it's like Transform, except you adapt instead of increase the mana cost. Well, that is all for the top Hearthstone cards of the week. Thank you again for the submissions, and thank you to all the creators of the cards. I will be back next week, hopefully not a tropical version of the show. Thank you all for watching again. If you would like to submit your custom cards, Twitter is below. Thank you for watching, and until next time.